Matt, let's say you're in front of your gamers, you've prepared all night, you've got your game, you're ready to go, and then suddenly you freeze. You don't know what to do. Your mind is a blank. How do you get past that?
I think what you do is you speak to an expert like Brenden Kumarasamy.
Tonight, we'll be doing that.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblins Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We are interviewing Brenden Kumarasamy.
that's right. Brenden Kumarasamy is a communications coach and founder of Mastertalk, where he coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel, also called Mastertalk, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. Brenden, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Matt and Eric. Thanks for having me.
Brenden, let's talk a little bit about how you got interested in public speaking and why you started your channel.
Yeah, for sure, guys. So what happened was when I was in college, I went to university and I did business school. And in business school, I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age are playing like rugby or baseball or basketball, some other sport you probably wouldn't see me playing, I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching the students in those programs so that they could do better at these competitions too. And I accidentally, big word on accident, by the way, got really good at coaching people on how to speak. And then I just started a YouTube channel because I felt everything I was blabbing to the students wasn't available for free on the internet. And then a few years later, it just popped. So here we are.
Very cool.
And the rest was history.
That's it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel that communication skills are very important overall, period, right? Like if you can't communicate to people effectively, then that can affect your job. It can affect
Your social life,
your social life.
your personal life. Basically, communication is a keystone of every part of your existence.
Yeah. And of course, talk about playing games, especially if you're telling a story. So if you're a dungeon master or being a character as well,
Sure.
you need to communicate that stuff effectively to others so that they can make the story with you.
Right.
It's collaborative. And so I think it's awesome that you're on the show tonight with us, talk a little bit about communication skills. We might even get to maybe some pointers and stuff. Of course, he's got a series, and we're going to post some links right here to that.
Right there.
But yeah, right there. So Brenden, talk to me about overall communication skills and maybe what they have in common when you're talking about gaming.
Absolutely. So let's play it in the context of, what is the purpose of the games, especially in different types of games. Like for me, as an example, I used to be a semi. I don't like to say professional because I wasn't that great at the game, but I was semi-pro at League of Legends. So I used to compete in a lot of tournaments. And as we know, League of Legends is a 5-on-5 game. And in that type of situation, communication is essential. If you don't know how to speak to your teams, you get killed in that game pretty quickly. And that's also true with many games out there in the world. So the correlation is the easier it is for you to trust your teammates, especially in team-based games, the easier it is for you to excel and perform better in the result of those games. So that's the correlation between both, is it just allows you to win more and have more success and also have more fun.
Makes sense. And for games like tabletop RPGs, communication is super important there too. It's not, it's not necessarily about winning, but for you to be able to collaboratively tell a story, everybody at the table has to understand one another.
Well, I can give a good example of that too. Let's say you're in a dungeon and you're fighting a monster or whatnot, and you're trying to figure out, maybe he's behind a door, right? There's an orc behind a door, a bunch of, warriors or whatnot. It's got a gelatinous cube. There's a dragon. There's a flumph that you really want to hug. Something, right? And you've got to figure out some kind of strategy. Well, proper communication skills, being able to speak to others and effectively, tell your idea and get everybody else's idea is very important because that could be success or failure in that game.
Very true.
Oh yeah, completely agree.
When you were talking about public speaking and we're talking about communication, what are some key skills you think would be, I guess, some things to work on to get your chops in from the start?
So what I would say, you two, is when we think about communication, I always like to start with the easy stuff, which is what are some easy exercises that we could work on? on a daily basis to improve our ability to communicate. The first exercise that I recommend is called the random word exercise. So the random word exercise is super simple. Pick a random word, like mouse, like school, like education, or games, and start creating random presentations with no preparation on the spot. And what's great about these exercises is that it allows you to make sense out of nonsense. And I always like to say that if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So when you go back to the video game that you're playing or the tabletop RPG game that you're playing, well, you know the rules. It's always the same thing. It's always the same monsters, the same dungeons, the same characters. So it's a lot easier for you to communicate more effectively if you talked about mangoes yesterday. So that's the first step. And make it a game, right? I've always believed communication can be gamified too. So what I get people to do is I have them do the random word exercise with their nieces, their nephews, their families. So that way they get better and it's fun also.
I love this. And I'll tell you, you know why I love this, Matt?
Because it's an improv game.
It is exactly this is 100% improv. You know, pick a random subject you know nothing about, give a presentation on it.
Yeah.
The only difference is that one is a scene versus one is a presentation, right?
Correct.
So it's really just the methodology behind what you're communicating.
I've actually seen an improv game that's similar to this. It's a slide presentation, and the improv person doesn't know what's on the next slides. And so they've got to build a cohesive presentation based off of the slides provided.
How delightful, right?
Oh yeah.
So it sounds like communication skills really come from you know working on thinking on your feet and then clearly communicating what's expected.
Absolutely. Think of it like juggling 18 balls at the same time. That's the way I think about communication. Because one of those balls is smiling, another ball is eye contact, another one is facial expressions, another one is vocal tone variety. But if you try and juggle all 18 games or all 18 parts at the same time, you'll lose the game because all of the balls will fall down. Especially a game like D&D. I mean, there's so many different complexities to that game that at some point, that's why I gave up. I never got into it because I was so overwhelmed by the number of characters and how the game works in general. So
we can run you through that. That's now you're on our side of the game. We can take care of that, no problem.
There you go. So it's always about one thing at a time. So for example, the game that you suggested, Matt, which actually has a name to it, it's called PowerPoint Karaoke. That's what we call it in our circles.
Oh, nice.
So that game is really difficult for most beginners. That's probably ball 10 or ball 12. Because most people are scared to just do the random word exercise. So doing PowerPoint slides that they never see in their life, especially when it's difficult, where we put pictures of a giraffe, you have to be like, So yeah, it's harder. But absolutely, I do think that when you work on this scale little by little, it builds confidence over time. Kind of like a Twitch streamer, right? Like when you start on Twitch, it's like really awkward because you're alone and there's nobody to talk to and you don't really have an audience. So you're just talking. And then eventually people start coming in. You're like, oh, people are actually listening to me. Oh my God, I just got my first donation. And then you start to build it up over time. But it's that confidence that builds up over time. But it's a lot harder to go from 0 to 1 than 1 to 100. So the key is to start.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned about developing comfort, like that's something that's a huge thing in any type of performative arts or speaking and such. And it really comes down to removing fear. And so in improv, we say a lot, follow the fear. And, if there's something that you're not good at doing, go try and do that on a stage. If you can't, like I don't dance, right? Like I just can't dance.
Sure.
I'm terrible at it, but I'll dance on a stage. I don't care how ridiculous I look because in improv, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to look ridiculous.
And people will laugh at you. Oh, no.
We used to have a guy that could not do accents when he used to play games where you do different accents or different cultures and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun, right? And this guy, no matter what accent it was, he sounded like an Irish guy. Every single accent. Didn't matter what it was. But the thing is he tried so hard to do the accent that no matter how bad it sounded, the audience loved it. And it comes down to the point where, look, he knew he sucked at it, but he still did it anyway. He was flying that plane. He crashed it into the mountain, right?
Sure.
And still on that plane, right? Never got off. And because of that, he won the audience over. And so that is overcoming that fear. And I think overcoming fear in any type of public engagement is a very useful thing to have.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's a funny story, by the way. I love that, the Irish. But I think it delves the point, because I've done a little bit of improv too, not as much as you have though, Eric. But I completely agree. I call it falling in love with disaster.
That's great. Yeah.
Exactly. Because since improv always teaches you to say yes, right, regardless of what happens in life, when you learn to fall in love with the worst things that could possibly happen in your life in a presentation setting, when you go back to a video game, I mean, nothing is going to happen. Like it's the same game all the time. It's the same players. It's the same characters. It's the same rules, and that the communication there just becomes a lot easier.
Let's talk a little bit about body language, because you did mention that earlier as well. What are some key tools in terms of like getting better body language to either get yourself in the mood to, present, or maybe to interpret other people's signals that you found very helpful?
I would say in the context of questions, in the context of body language is important, but not the most important thing in the world. Especially as gamers, because most of our time is spent typing on a computer and playing with a mouse. Most of the body language that we'll have, unless we're streaming a game or we're playing in person, like a tabletop kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a big fan of Catan, right? So when you're playing something like that,
yeah,
right? So in that situation, body language becomes a bit more important. But generally speaking, most of the body language that matters is on your face, right? Like, how are you paying attention to other people? Are you smiling when you're listening to other people? Are you emoting your face even a little bit? That usually helps. Or if you're trying to hide a secret, like in Catan, right? Are you keeping the emotionless face, the poker face, so that people don't see the differences, depending on how competitive you are? But I think the most important thing is definitely the random word exercise. That's the exercise that most people write down, but they don't actually do. Right? That's what I like about Eric, is like he doesn't just say he likes improv, he actually did it. And that's the key. It's not about being great at something, kind of like the Irish guy in his accent. It's about saying, are we actually willing to do this? Are we actually going to put ourselves out there and get it done? And that's really the most important part.
What the audience doesn't know is half of what we're talking about right now literally is improvising, because they don't see the bullet points.
Right. So how do you think, like approaching it from the opposite side, how do you think that possibly TTRPGs, like tabletop games, could help with public speaking?
Interesting. The other way around. So quick side note on the piece around improv, like with the whole bullet points, and then let's get into the tabletops question, is the whole idea that with the piece around improv, let's say you watch a dance recital and somebody makes a mistake in the dance. Does the audience know? No, because they don't know the routine.
Right.
Right.
Not unless there are other dancers. But yeah.
Yeah. Or if they fall down.
Yeah, screw them, But yeah, you're right. Most people don't know.
But they want to know. Because falling down might be a part of the routine. Right? Unless they make it seem, right, going back to body language, unless they make it seem like it's a mistake. Right? That's the key. So it's always important to keep that in mind. In terms of games affecting communication, let me explain it from my point of view, because I'm a lot more familiar with the online games. But then let's move it into tabletops. I would say the biggest thing I got from games, but as you could tell, I'm more competitive than most gamers that you'll have on your show. It really gave me that desire to win and play team. So teamwork is really essential to all the games that I've played. So earlier in my life, when I was in 4th grade, it started with RuneScape, and then I had a Club Penguin craze, and then after that, it was Pokemon, obviously, right? Played all the Pokemon games.
Oh yeah.
A little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then after Yu-Gi-Oh, it was a little bit of Beyblade, and then after that, it was League of Legends, pretty much. So across all of those games, what I find video games in general teach us is the willingness to work together as a team to achieve a specific objective. So I was able to bring that later in my career, when I started it, frankly, because I brought that same level of obsession. But I think tabletop games, what's super fun, when we're all in person, we're having a great time, is those types of games also help us with socialization in a fun way. A lot of my friends, actually, because I'm a French speaker, because I'm based in Montreal, so a lot of my friends speak French. They actually learned English through video games because in video games you actually have to communicate in English for the most part, especially in RuneScape. So English language learning is actually a big one too that I think tabletop applies to communication or just video games in general.
It's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Like I could see, I love the idea of like teamwork. I love the idea of learning communication skills and stuff like that to become a better public speaker through gaming. That's really neat. And I think inversely also, knowing how to speak then consequently lets you get better at gaming, regardless of whether you're telling a story as a dungeon master, right, as a DM or GM or storyteller, right, because there's lots of games, not just D&D, but also as a player, telling your own perspective of that story.
And I will say this, there's a teacher friend of mine who runs a tabletop gaming club after school, and she had an English as second language student that wanted to play but didn't feel comfortable with their level of English. So now at that table, Spanish is Elven. They have an Elven character, and anytime they don't know a word for whatever they need in English, they just use the Spanish word, and the people at the table whose Spanish is good enough just cover for them. And it's just that the character doesn't know enough common to speak.
I love that idea.
That's
I think
awesome.
we should do that what it works. They're German, right? Make them German.
Sure.
Yeah, why not? It's like, what would the French be? The French would be
elves.
Elves?
Uppity. Most of the French people I've dealt with are Parisians.
Okay, fair enough. But
I can't help it.
Dwarves are obviously going to be Scottish.
Are they though?
I don't know.
I feel like dwarves are truly Scandinavian.
That's a trope though. If they speak with the Scottish accent, even though
that's because they're blacksmiths, and in every video game, the blacksmith has a Scottish accent.
Why is that? Too? Think about
That's
that.
true, actually.
It is,
in RuneScape, that was the case.
Yep, and Diablo, and it became a thing, and for some reason, it's stuck around. It's just collective consciousness, I guess.
So let's consider this, both of you. We've got skills that we develop from telling stories that apply into real life, both in public speaking and just socially, right?
Sure.
We can develop our skills speaking better and communicating better and apply that directly to gaming. So we've got a nice little circle of learning and communication. And I would pose this to either of you. What do you think would be maybe a couple of potential takeaways from this whole circle? Are they related, or do you think they're two different skills with different names?
I think end of the day, it's all communication. And whether you're approaching storytelling from a public speaker angle or public speaking from a storytelling angle, both of them are somewhat separate skill sets that can definitely be used to increase your ability in either direction.
Mm-hmm. Brenden, what do you think about all of this?
I agree too, team. Definitely with Matt's points. I think communication affects every area of life. And I think there's lots of correlations between comms and every other skill set. That's why I make crazy videos on my channel about like the 3 lessons I learned from rappers that apply to presentation, the 3 lessons I learned from theater that I think you would dig, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? That apply to communication. Because Matt's right. Regardless of what you do, communicate plays some role. And I always like to add that communication is a multiplier effect. When you do something right in one way, it starts to apply better in others. Let me give an example. Going back to the tabletop RPG games. So in that context, let's say, for example, communication is a multiplier effect, right? Because if you know how to communicate effectively in a tabletop game, you could communicate more effectively when you're at a company, when you're communicating with colleagues, when you're talking to them about work deliverables. In the same way that if you know how to do that better at work, you'll do that better in the tabletop. So it's not that you go back to zero per se every time you learn a new skill. That's what's nice about communication, is it stacks on top of each other over time. And I definitely feel that a lot of my gaming experience really helped me later in life when I started to really use communication for as a calling, as a vocation.
So it's all about like learning the fundamentals, and then they build upon those, and then it's just variations of those fundamentals.
Sure.
So I learned how to communicate effectively, speak in public. That applies to me presenting to the boss or doing an interview, thinking on my feet, right, as an improviser. Hey, look, go into an interview and they ask you that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You can't just say having your job, right? And get the job. Although you could do that if you're ballsy.
You could, depending on the job, they may appreciate that.
That man has grit. I'm going to hire him immediately and then
CEO.
put him on retirement. Yeah, CEO right there. Stamps it down. Just stamps it on your forehead. Your CEO material, sir. Be great.
Well, you got to be willing to say it at some point, right? I mean, end of the day, if your trajectory intention is to continue to go upwards, run it. Like if you're that ambitious, then you need to be in a job that appreciates that ambition.
Correct.
So
Absolutely.
I think there's a chance that actually might be a solid plan. Where do you want to be in 5 years? CEO.
Yeah. Now, on a final note for that as well, you got to consider intent and purpose as well. So all communication has like a purpose. So whether you're presenting something, what am I getting out of that? Well, it's not just to present the material. It's oftentimes to influence others. And I feel like that can also directly apply to gaming because particularly if you're a character, right?
Yeah.
So I've got, let's just pretend you say like you're a sorcerer or whatever, right? And you can portray a specific emotion or a storyline or, whatever you're trying to accomplish in the game. And that skill of knowing how to present that particular point of view is very handy back and forth, right?
Sure.
So I'm a better storyteller because I can play my character better, but I also can then get my point across when I'm in that board meeting trying to present something to somebody or speaking in front of a large audience.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter whether or not you're suave in your personal life. Can you fake it?
Fake it till you make it?
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. Sorcerers, warlocks, they're all charisma based, right? You gotta be able to fake it.
I think for me, when it comes to intent and purpose, here's a question that we can help us think about this. And it's a little bit more esoteric, but since we're in an esoteric world right now on this podcast, we might as well go there. And the question is simply this. How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Okay, it's a question we don't really think about. Because whenever we think about communication, we always focus on the negativity, the stress, the anxiety. Whereas my POV is like, okay, but how would your life be better? And for all of us, the answer is different. Maybe Eric wants a promotion at work. Maybe Matt wants to grow some business that he's doing. And for somebody else, it might be being better at video games. And the key is to figure out what that intent is and to follow it through to the end, but to also reflect on it to begin with, for sure.
That makes sense.
And overall, communication is a universal skill that everybody has. And it's something that everybody needs to learn. Got to get good at it. Get good at talking.
Yeah. Or if you're brave enough, do improv like Eric.
There you go.
Occasionally, yeah. Brenden, where can we find more of your work?
So two ways to keep in touch. The first one is definitely the YouTube channel, Mastertalk. Just go to Mastertalk and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way is I do a free training over Zoom on communication every 3 weeks. And if you want to register for that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
You heard free?
Yes.
Yeah, communication. He's all about helping folks, just like we are. So get out there, check out his stuff. We'll have the links on our site as well as everywhere else.
Put them down below in YouTube.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brenden Kumarasamy is a communication coach and founder of Mastertalk. Brenden, thanks so much for joining our podcast.
It was great having you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Any questions or comments, hit us up at Goblin's Corner on Twitter and, of course, all the social media channels. Do you like our show? Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, YouTube, and Twitch.
You could do us a favor, click the 5 stars, give us a review on iTunes and Podchaser. On YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button. Also hit the bell so you get notifications. It helps us get our show in front of more people. It boosts the show and it feeds the hungry algorithm.
The hungry algorithm is currently creeping up on you with a PowerPoint presentation ready to go. That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And we'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblin's Corner has been written and produced by Eric Holden
and Matt Staples.
D20 did our music.
And this is, in fact, a Subterranean production.
Your voice is so low.